Let's make an invitation for a cool party. This will be a fun way to practice blend modes and a ton of other great affinity skills. As part of the invitation, we're going to use these smoke textures from resourceboy.com. And like all of the other freebies we've used, the link to this page is in the free resources PDF. Go ahead and download these textures, and then I'll meet you in Affinity Photo. To begin this project, I've made a document that's 2700 pixels wide by 4000 pixels tall. You can use whatever size document you want, but I just thought I'd tell you that's what I'll be using. To begin, let's create a really beautiful dynamic background. To start, let's add some color. I'm going to go to the top of the screen to select Layer, and then I'll go down to New Fill Layer. Automatically, the gradient tool will be selected. So with this, go ahead and click and drag from the top to the bottom. I'm going to leave the bottom black, so I'm just going to click on this top white color stop so that I can change its color to a purple color. All right, so now we have our color set, so let's add some textures. First, I'm going to go to the Place Image tool, and I'm going to choose number 34. I mostly want this smoke to be in the purple area of our document, so I'll click and drag like this. Then, to remove the black background, I'm just going to change the blend mode to screen. This already looks so nice, but I want this to be a little bit more subtle. That way the text that we add later will be very readable. To help blend this into its background, first, I'm going to change the color of the smoke to a purple color. So I'll go to our adjustments and I'll apply a recolor adjustment. I'll click and drag this on top of the smoke layer so that it's a child layer. Then I'll change the hue to a purple color. With that finished, next I want to add a blur to our smoke layer. So I'll make sure to have that layer selected, and then I'll click on the FX, and I'm just going to add a blur to this smoke. Something like this. Then I'll close out of this. This is a really good start to our poster, but I think I want to add a little more texture. So I'll go back to the Place Image tool, and this time I'm going to choose number 19. I'm going to add this smoke so it covers this corner up here in smoke. So I'll just click and drag until there's smoke in that area. Then I'll change the blend mode to screen. And then we can go ahead and add some effects to this to make it blend in. To start, let's add another recolor adjustment to this one. I'll make it a child layer to the smoke, and then I'll change the hue. Next, I want to blur this smoke, and as a really fun trick, I just want to show you that you can click and drag on any layer's effects and add them to another layer. So now this smoke is just as blurred as our other smoke. Okay, I just have one more texture I want to add, and that's a film grain texture. I'm going to use the first film grain texture, and then I'll press open, and I'll just add this into our document. Right now, it's being placed as a child layer to our other smoke layer, so I'll just click and drag this on top of everything. And now we can adjust how this looks. Because this has a black background and I want to keep the white speckles, I'm going to change the blend mode to screen. I really like how the texture looks at the top of the design, but toward the bottom, it looks a little intense on this black background. To make this more subtle, I'm going to add a mask to this layer. Then I'm going to grab the gradient tool, and I'll just click from the top to the bottom. This has made it so our mask is white at the top, so it's fully revealing that film grain, and black at the bottom, so the film grain fully disappears. But I actually don't want it to be fully removed down here. Instead, I'm going to make sure this color stop is selected, and I'm going to change it from black to 50% gray. That way, we can see some of the film grain down here. It's just not quite as intense as it originally was. Here's the before and after of adding that gradient mask. Okay, we've come really far in our project so far. Now it's time to add some text into our document. I'm going to grab the Artistic Text tool, and I'll begin by adding a little bit of text up here at the top. I'm going to type out Affinity Revolution. Then with the Move tool selected, I'm going to make sure we have a nice bold font. It's actually already set to the font I wanted, Arial Black. Then I'm just going to make this text white. And I'll make it a bit smaller. Now these letters look pretty close together, and I'd like to fix that. An easy shortcut to fix spacing of letters is to have the Move tool selected, and then hold down Alt or Option, and then use the arrow keys to decrease or increase the spacing of the letters. All right, this looks really nice. So I'm just going to make sure this is centered in our document, and then we can go ahead and begin with our next line of text. I'll press Command or Control J to duplicate this text, then I'll drag it down. To edit this text, I'll triple click on it, and I'm just going to type presents. Then I'll select the Move tool, and I'm just going to change the font to a simpler font. And I'll make sure this is nice and centered in our document. Okay, we're done with the top, so now let's add some text to the bottom. I'll duplicate this with Command or Control J, and I'll drag this toward the bottom. I'll triple click to edit the text, and I'll just type in a date for our party. Then I'll make this larger. This looks good to me in this font, so I'm just going to grab the Move tool, and I'll press Command or Control J to duplicate this text. I'll drag it down, I'll triple click, and we can just type in some more information about the party. For this text, I'm just going to grab the Move tool, and I'm going to unbold it, just to create a little variation between the text. Alright, I have one more line of text for down here. I'll press Command or Control J to duplicate this, and I'll drag it down. I'll triple click, and then I'll type in a little bit more text. I'm just going to shrink this down so it's nice and small. And I'll place this at the bottom. Alright, this all looks pretty nice. I just want to add one more detail down here. I want to add a little line going from here to here to divide these two pieces of text. We can do that using the pen tool. So I'll select that. I'll hover right here so it lines up with the edge of this text, and then I'll click to lay down the first point. I'll hold Shift to keep this a perfectly straight line, and I'll line it up with the end of this line of text. Over in the color panel, I'm just going to change this to white, and then we can adjust the width of our stroke in the context toolbar. With this all finished, I'm just going to grab the Move tool so I can make sure everything is centered in our document. You can see this green line keeps appearing right here, saying that it's centered, but this is not the center of our document. I'm wondering if it's trying to line up with some of our backgrounds down here. I'm going to hold Shift to select all of these, and then I'll group them with Command or Control G. Then I'll lock them so I can't move them. And now let's see if that helped. There we go. Now it's lining up with the center of the document. Okay, I just wanted to take a little bit of time to clean up the positioning of all of the text. And now we're ready for the main event. I'm going to add the title of the party to the center of our document. I want the font of this large text to be big and bold, so I'm going to use this font that we used for the beginning of our text. I'll press Command or Control J to duplicate this, and I'll drag it down here. Then I'll triple click, and we can go ahead and type our text. I'll grab the Move tool, and I'll make this quite a bit larger. Now, this text is still spaced the way we spaced the letters up here. I actually want to fix this, so I'm going to hold Alt or Option, and I'll use the left arrow key to make the text closer again. Alright, this looks pretty good, so I'll just duplicate this with Command or Control J. I'll drag this down here. I'll triple click, and I'll just change this so it says Party. I'll use the Move tool, and for this second word, I'm going to shrink it down so it fits in the width of the word cool. Alright, now I'm going to change how the text looks. I want this to look really cool and bold, so there's a few things I want to change. First, I'm going to add a gradient to each one of these words. So I'll select the gradient tool, and I'm going to click from the top to the bottom. I'm going to keep the top white, but I'll change the bottom to a nice purple color. And I'll make it a little bit lighter. Then I'm going to do the exact same thing for this text, so I'll select its layer, and with the gradient tool, I'll go from top to bottom, changing the bottom color stop to this light purple color. It's actually been stored over here, so I can just click that. And now our words have the exact same gradient. Okay, next, I'm going to hold Shift to select both of the words at the same time. Then I'm going to get out a Shape tool so that I can access the stroke option up here in the context toolbar. I'm going to change the stroke, so I'll just make this a little bit larger like that. Then I'm going to change the stroke color right here, and I'll make it a little bit lighter. This stroke looks really nice on these letters. To finish off these effects, I'm going to click on the FX down here so that we can continue to make these words pop. First, I'm going to add an outer glow to these letters. I'll increase the radius. I really like that glow. Maybe I'll just make it a little bit bigger by typing a larger number and then pressing Enter. Then I'm going to change the color to purple. I don't want it to look white like this, so I'm just going to change it to a similar purple color. And I'll make it lighter. Okay, this looks a little too intense. I'm going to lower the intensity slider and the opacity slider. Okay, I think that's the look I was going for. Here's the before and after of that effect. Next, I want to add an outer shadow to our letters. Outer shadow can help separate our text from the background. So to do this, I'm just going to increase our radius